Joining us now to talk more about the 31-year-old's legacy is Matt Terrill, former chief of staff to Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. Matt, thank you so much for joining us this early morning. I wonder, just to get your reaction on the awful events of yesterday and what this says about where we are in America with free speech and the horrible rhetoric that likely led up to this event.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, thoughts and prayers are with the entire Kirk family, all of Charlie Kirk's family, friends, those who've been impacted by yesterday's horrific news. And look, to be a leader, you have to have followers, and Charlie Kirk had many followers. This is someone who wasn't just a leader, though. He was somebody who inspired a movement, and that's rare. You know, to have someone who really is leading a movement in our country, that's a rare thing, and that's exactly what he did. And this is no question to leave a major hole in the conservative movement, in the MAGA movement. This is someone who brought many people into the conservative movement, particularly young Americans, people who were never involved in politics before. And he did it through his words. He did it through his rhetoric. And it wasn't through violence. This is somebody who was about peace, was about ensuring they could get his message across in a way that was inspiring, and that would try to unite people. And that is something that has now been lost. And thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's been impacted by this.
And Matt, the man for whose presidential campaign you were part of, Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State, I think most people would say within politics is a paragon of civil discourse. Charlie Kirk believed in civil discourse. Do you think people like Secretary Rubio and Charlie Kirk can be a model which others will follow? Because we do have a problem in the political arena now, and it does go to some very high levels.
I think they absolutely can, but it's going to require both sides doing it. And I think what you're seeing right now that is shocking, in leading up to this, was many politicians who are saying horrific things, saying very dangerous things. I mean, you have people out there calling President Trump a fascist. We've seen the comments that were made against Elon Musk. We saw what happened to many of his dealerships around the country. And so it requires leaders coming up, stepping up, and taking action here. I do believe that this can happen, where we can get united, where we can draw back the rhetoric and the violence and get to a place where we're united as a country. But, the question is going to be, is this just a moment where we're uniting right now around this moment, or will this last? And I think what we unfortunately have seen, though, is that there's a pattern here. We saw, not just with the assassination yesterday of Charlie Kirk, but we saw the President of the United States, President Trump, almost assassinated on the campaign trail. And it's not just with political leaders. I think many Americans look at this right now and say, you know what? We're seeing violence in our streets. You look at over 250 homicides in Chicago. I mean, it's not just in L.A., Chicago, or New York. You're seeing in North Carolina. We saw a young woman murdered on a train coming home in North Carolina. So I think what's different now than where it's been in the past is that in the past we've seen political violence, whereas against leaders and presidents and people of that nature. But I think Americans right now recognize that there's violence against themselves right now, potentially, that everyone could potentially be a target given where the violence is in this country. And to President Trump's credit, he is trying to tackle violence. He's trying to reduce crime. And whether it's trying to tackle that against influencers like people like Charlie Kirk or against everyday citizens, that is something President Trump is trying to do, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for doing it.
I mean, Matt, these kinds of things are not supposed to happen in America. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's why people come to this country. But I'm glad that you said you were optimistic that Americans can unite again. But quickly, how? How does that happen?
It's going to take both citizens and our public servants doing it. It's going to require everybody in this country stepping up to say, you know what, we might have differences, but we're going to do that through our voices, not through violence. We may have disagreements, but we're going to take that to the ballot box, or we'll take it through peaceful protests. Violence is not the answer. What happened yesterday is not the answer. And so to answer your question, I'm optimistic as long as leaders will step up to the plate. And again, I go back to, we have seen, unfortunately, public servants, members of Congress, for example, say some really horrific things, inciting violence, in my view, which should be unacceptable to all Americans, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, conservative or a liberal. This can be done, though. It just requires leaders stepping up and citizens and voters doing the same as well. Now is the time to come together as a country. It shouldn't take what happened yesterday for that to happen, but we must learn from all of this and hopefully as a country come together and have better days forward here.
And Matt, I wonder what you think the effect is on retail politics. You've been heavily involved in that, obviously, on a presidential campaign, particularly the early parts of any presidential campaign. It's all about outdoor events, meeting and greeting people. What does this do, this kind of horrific act, do to the future of retail politics in America and the chance for us to meet our candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, look, when you're on a political campaign, let's just say you're on a presidential campaign for one of these candidates who may be running in the future in a Republican primary, for example, for president, what I think people need to recognize is you don't automatically get Secret Service. So, like, you get Secret Service at the end or towards the end of the campaign or when you're going to be the presumptive nominee in most cases. The reality is, the challenge for a lot of candidates, public servants, is they don't have protection. So if you're doing these outdoor events like we saw yesterday, or as we saw in Butler, Pennsylvania, with President Trump, there is a risk there. But even with President Trump, he had Secret Service, and he was a target, and he almost got killed. So I think right now what we need to do is, you know, bring down the violence. And whether that's in indoor settings or outdoor settings, the key is citizens and public servants need to step up. But there should be concern right now, because this is a violent time. And I go back to, it's not just public servants and elected officials who I think are concerned. Everyday Americans don't have protection in many cases. You know, there's not people walking around, most Americans aren't walking around with bodyguards, right? So, you know, this is a moment where both for reducing crime, clean up our streets, and for ensuring that our public servants and people like Charlie Kirk, who is a citizen, who is a political influencer citizen, can be protected. That should be the goal here, but you raise an important question. How do you protect candidates, for example, at these public events? I think people should take that into consideration when planning events, given the environment we're in right now.
Yep. Matt Terrill, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, sir. And we are sorry it's under these terrible circumstances, but we thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Matt.
And we thank all our viewers.